everyone to the Cloudbakers Quinix AppSheet webinar here on replacing manual processes in your organization. My name is Eric Daniel. I'll be running you through kind of some high-level information to get us prepared before we jump into our demo here today of kind of real-world use cases of the AppSheet platform. Essentially, right, I'm an account executive here at Cloudbakers Quinix. I work specifically with Google Workspace. AppSheet is a part of that kind of umbrella of products from Google. So think of, docs, sheets, slides, etc., right? All of those productivity and collaboration tools that you use day to day, right? That's kind of the product suite that I support here at Cloudbakers. I've been really excited to learn a lot about AppSheet, kind of getting prepared for this webinar here today. I'm joined with Rommel Silva, and I'll let him introduce himself here.
Awesome, thanks, Eric. Hey, everyone, my name is Rommel. I'm on the deployment team here at Cloudbakers. My background is primarily in application development and cloud-based infrastructure. And over the past couple of months, I've been very focused on helping clients migrate to AppSheet, training them, and building custom solutions within the platform.
Awesome. Thanks, Rommel. So what are we going to get into today, right? Essentially, here at Cloudbakers Quinix, right, I just want to kind of preface everything with, a little bit of background on the organization itself, right? We are a premier partner with Google. We do work everything in the cloud there. So from GCP to workspace, migrations, et cetera, right? We're certified in a lot of different ways when it comes to, working with those solutions, whether it's application development, transforming your entire environment, right? Providing analytical solutions, right? And then actually running, MSP certified infrastructure projects for you there. So it's a really exciting place to be. We do a lot of things here in the cloud. Everything we do actually is in the cloud. So, we are, kind of those experts in the industry when it comes to, anything Google, right? So when it comes to the webinar here today, right, what are we going to be jumping into? I've got a few things that I want to do that will kind of preface the conversation around AppSheet and how it can really provide a lot of value for your business. Essentially, I want to set the stage with kind of understanding a little bit better kind of the journey of a digital transformation for an organization. So from when you found the organization to when you grow into a full-fledged enterprise, right? Why AppSheet matters in regards to that journey, right? And then kind of how it's been utilized in real-world scenarios, and then kind of a live demo of, some use cases or a case study that we've come up with here. Then finally, we'll wrap up with getting started with AppSheet. So I'll just kind of inform you a little bit about how Cloudbakers can help you get started with AppSheet at your organization. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So just a few key terms here up front, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We'll be using these throughout the presentation. Essentially, there's a couple of concepts like a citizen developer that come up frequently with AppSheet. So the idea with AppSheet, right, is to kind of reduce the barriers when it comes to creating solutions or applications from scratch. So a citizen developer is an employee, essentially, who has a no-code tool set to build actual front-end applications that are working on mobile devices, web applications, right, desktops, etc. So essentially, a citizen developer is someone who doesn't necessarily have a technical background. They don't write code or anything like that, but they are able to, build out applications when they're provided a set of tools and the knowledge to use those tools. And then digital transformation here is really just, it's the concept of a journey of digitizing every aspect of your business, right? A lot of times when you start out, you don't necessarily need to digitize everything. You don't need that type of information. You can use, physical mediums like pen and paper. You can graduate to stuff like a spreadsheet, right? And so on as you kind of continue your journey. Essentially, this concept is really more of a ongoing process that businesses are, stepping through as they grow and expand. So as you reach certain levels of your organization, there are certain requirements. You need more data, essentially, to make the right decision. And so digital transformation is that journey. And I'll walk you through kind of an example here over the next few slides of a typical journey for an organization. No matter where you are on that journey, AppSheet can absolutely step in and provide a lot of value. But we'll talk a little bit more about that here in the coming slides. So what does a typical digital transformation journey look like, right? There's a few points on here. There's a lot of twists and turns in the road as you try to grow and expand and dominate the world, right? So essentially, you found your company because you decided to solve a problem that you were facing, every day, and you wanted to get a group of people together to kind of go after that, right? Typically, your first step is going to be implementing some type of productivity or collaboration suite. So for us here, that's Workspace, so Docs, Sheets, etc. This is essentially just a way for people to be able to generate documentation, to send out those invoices, right? To build and communicate, collaborate with each other in the organization. Typically, this is a fundamental step that everyone's going through, when they start a business. The next step is typically some type of financial system. So QuickBooks, Xero, whatever it may be, right? Spreadsheets are great for managing your accounting early on, but once you reach a certain size and complexity, right, you really do need to get a more niche solution in place to really help automate certain aspects of that, to be able to close your books out faster, right, and to remove a lot of headaches around that aspect of your business. So we find a lot of folks out there are stepping into some type of financial suite after they implement a productivity solution. Next step, right, now that you've kind of figured out where you stand from a profit and loss perspective, how you're managing your assets, right, your total value, your revenue, etc. You need to consistently win deals to continue to grow. So a lot of folks are stepping into a CRM solution like Salesforce, a marketing solution like HubSpot, right, or project management solutions like Asana or the others, right? So this is essentially, how do I more consistently get deals in the door and deliver on those deals, right? So essentially just ways to support the growth that you're trying to achieve. If you're in the right industry, it may make sense to have an ERP system at this point, right? You might have a few different solutions out there, and now you need to centralize things so that you've got a clearer picture of how the organization's doing as a whole. ERP systems provide a lot of structure around business process. If you're not in that type of industry, right, it may just be an analytics solution like a Tableau or a Looker, right? So this is really just a way to combine data to really gain further insight into what makes your business successful, and then kind of leverage that information to make the right decisions. At this point, right, you've probably reached the end of the road when it comes to market solutions for broad problems that most businesses face, and you're going to find yourself looking at the options out there. And the thing that's going to come up more often than not at this point is that you're going to need to build something from the ground up for yourself. Typically, traditionally, this has been something that has been very expensive. It requires a very specific set of skills, and those skills have become harder and harder to find, especially post-COVID. So a lot of folks are struggling with talent acquisition, and then the cost alone is prohibitive for a lot of organizations to develop these solutions. So essentially, at this point, right, there's no real third-party tool out there that's going to, match your requirements exactly. So you have to build something. With this, right, AppSheet kind of steps in at this point and gets you down that last mile, right, of digital transformation for your organization. Let's remove friction points. Let's get rid of these pains that we're seeing day to day at the warehouse level, on the shop floor, in the field, right, in the office even. There's a lot of ways that AppSheet can kind of step in and create value for an organization without the cost that you see on traditional custom development. So why is AppSheet really something that you should be considering if you're running a business, or if you're even just running a department, right? There's a lot of problems that you're facing on a daily basis, but just don't necessarily have a solution for, right? Things are changing constantly. Business can be disrupted overnight, and you've got to react and respond and evolve to these types of needs fast. So a no-code solution like AppSheet, which means everything is clickable, configurable, but it's super flexible as well, opens the door for folks to solve their own problems. So you don't need to have some team running off and implementing some third-party tool IT doesn't know about, right? And trying to solve the problem on their own, right? If you enable them with something like AppSheet to build their own solution and then govern that solution from, an IT perspective, you're really going to help folks out. Development is really expensive. It's time consuming, like I've already kind of discussed. Essentially with AppSheet, what you can do is you can focus on how you want to, what the problem is and what you want the solution to be without necessarily worrying how you get there, right? So developers are incredible. They're hard to find though. AppSheet is one of these things that really reduces the skill gap to develop custom solutions that provide a lot of value in the shop, in the office with a lower cost. And then a lot of times, right, you're coming up against the fact that there is no solution for your exact problem, right? Maybe the way you do business is just a little bit different than the way most people do it. If you don't have a broad set of folks who need the solution like that, there's not going to really be someone willing to step out there and create that and sell that across the board. So you don't have to sacrifice functionality to use kind of a higher level tool, right, from an organization that's selling, to a broad base of folks. AppSheet allows people who are experiencing the problem to build a solution for it. And so how does it really do that, right? There's 3 steps in this, and it's an iterative process. You could think of this almost as like a circle here. So essentially what you do is you would connect it to your data. This could be a spreadsheet. This could be a database. This could be an API. Essentially, at that point, AppSheet will automatically build a front end for you. So now you don't have to worry about the UI. You just have to worry about customizing it for your needs. And then you deploy it out for your team. So that's as simple as publishing it and then making it available to folks. And now you've got it in your users' hands. They can use the application. If they need to make, or if they have any feedback or they need any changes, it's as simple as going back to the customized piece, right? Kind of loop back around and iterate through. And these things can take, 5 minutes. I'll show you here an example of some real world uses of AppSheet for Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, where, they were out on the airstrip testing the application, and then they had a few comments and he was able to get the updates in the system, that day. So it's really something that helps you create solutions quickly. It helps you manage your data more efficiently because you're no longer having to, take pen and paper and enter it into a spreadsheet, right? You're automatically loading that into the right system. Now you've got automations that are available, right? You can trigger a lot of different activities with an AppSheet product, and then you can share those insights across the board, right? It's built with reporting in mind, so there's actually analytics that come out of it without you even having to create anything. So from a day-to-day perspective, employees will just go out and solve problems as they see them, right? They experience these issues, they will reach out and use any tool at hand to solve those problems. First thing that always comes to mind is pen and paper. They may create a template, print it out, and start handing it out, right? This is great because it's super easy to interact with. Everyone knows how to work with pen and paper. It's really easy to generate, so its time to value is really quick, but it's error prone. If someone loses a piece of paper, you lose all the data for that day. It's inefficient as well because you can't actually analyze that data and you can't share that data efficiently. So it's super inefficient in that regard. Next, they'd probably move on to something like a spreadsheet or a form. This is great because now you're actually getting the data in the correct format. So it's really easy and familiar to people. You can control the data, right? Most people know what a spreadsheet is. They know how to interact with it. But again, it's error prone. You don't really get a lot of workflows. Macros are insecure a lot of times and difficult to use when you get to a certain scale. And then, of course, you can't really distribute a spreadsheet across thousands of people to get data into it. There's a lot of overlap that's happening there, and there might be errors that arise from that as well. Another solution that they might find is that they go to IT and they ask them to build them a solution. But if the problem doesn't provide enough value, they are not going to be able to get that funded. it's going to take forever to build it. And then if they ever need to adjust it, it's going to take another 3-6 months to get those updates in place. So it's something that's really cumbersome and expensive. So it's not usually an option for folks. And then finally, right, they may just go out and purchase a solution under your nose, right? They'll take their budget, they'll go out there, they'll buy a third-party solution that kind of fits, but it's not perfect. And they'll be spending money that you didn't know they were spending on IT products that you didn't know they had. This is great because you don't have to have any development experience to get this in place. It's configurable to a certain extent and might even be, a really niche solution for you. But at the end of the day, right, you're going to run into some inflexibility there at some point. There's going to be the opportunity cost of the licensing, provisioning, any type of implementation work it takes to get it connected and loaded up with data. And then the more you allow teams to kind of buy these solutions, the larger the tech stack gets, the harder it is to manage from an IT perspective. So essentially, this is really just one of the, a few of the ways that folks will really just go out there and try to solve problems themselves when they're not given a toolkit to do so. So how does this all kind of map to the real world here, right? So we're talking about Dallas-Fort Worth Airport here. I mean, these were folks who are actually responding to these events. Essentially, what they were looking to do were build solutions for emergencies that happen at an airport. So if there was a mass casualty event, meaning like an airplane had to make a sudden landing, the landing gear wasn't working right, people are flying down the slides, how do you manage the injuries, triage those folks, and get them to the hospitals as quickly as possible? The way they were doing that was using a whiteboard. It had a format on it, and I'll show you that here in a second. And they were able to kind of map it out, but there were a lot of pain points that always came back to the whiteboard. Essentially, they had to make phone calls to hospitals to keep people up to date. Someone had to call someone to check the whiteboard, right, if they weren't on site with it, right? And more things kept leading back to this whiteboard as being kind of a bottleneck for a lot of actions. Now, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport didn't just build a patient tracker. They built a couple of other applications, but I really want to focus on this patient tracker. So the old way of them doing it, right, is they would have a whiteboard that looked a little bit like this on the left-hand side here. They would have these triage tags that they would literally attach to these people. This would have things like allergens, injuries, other things like that on it. If this gets lost, now the EMT doesn't have the right information, the hospital doesn't have their name, and it becomes a lot more difficult to get these people reunited with their loved ones. They're using dry erase markers on this whiteboard. There are firefighters who are wearing a lot of gear, and they might just squeeze by and wipe off an entire row of data here. And now you don't know how many people are at what hospital and what the capacity is and so on. So there was a lot of risk using this. There were a lot of bottlenecks with this old way of doing it when it came to patient tracking and triaging. So they went ahead and they built a mobile application that tied back to spreadsheets to kind of address these problems, right? To make this data visible to everyone who needs to know about, what's the transit time, right? How many beds are available in the ICU at this place, right? And they were able to customize the application to be usable by EMTs who are wearing gloves, right? So they're able to change the size of the buttons, how they interact with it, right? And configure the UI for the context at hand. And so this was all connected to different systems, right? They had this connected to Google's API to get the transit times. They had this connected to the hospital's back end so that they knew how many available beds there were. And they were able to kind of distribute the information to many people so that they eliminated the need for calls back and forth. You don't have to worry about someone picking up their phone because you can go and check the dashboard of what's happening, right? And this was all built by the frontline workers at DFW who were experiencing the pain points with the whiteboard. So a really transformative kind of application of AppSheet that literally saves lives on the tarmac out there at Dallas-Fort Worth. And they did all of this for less than $100 a month when it comes to kind of the cost of running this, right? No one wants to be caught with a solution that's super expensive all the time if you're only going to use it in emergencies. So this was a perfect example of how AppSheet could come in and really solve issues that not necessarily, were present in everyone's mind, but were actually causing a lot of delays in their kind of process, right? So with all of this, right, this is just one application of how AppSheet has kind of come in and transformed how people do work and kind of created visibility, created efficiencies where folks thought things were fine, and added a lot of value at a very low price. Next up, we've kind of got this case study that we're going to walk into here. This is really going to be setting the stage for the demonstration that Rommel's going to run through. I'll let him kind of take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks for setting the stage, Eric. And let me start sharing my screen here then. Confirm that everyone can see my screen. Awesome. I'll take that as a yes. So we'll walk you through a demo in a slightly unconventional way. Eric and I have attended many of these webinars in the past, and they all revolve around creating some sort of data set from scratch in an app for an extremely simple use case that are often not reflective of how AppSheet can best be leveraged in the real world. So in the next 5 slides, I'll show you how to quickly spin up a custom application, and then we can jump into a couple of real scenarios where we actually be using that app. So to jump into it, let me introduce you to Acme Metals. They're a metals manufacturing and distribution company based in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that was founded in 1994 and is currently privately owned. In 2020, they generated anywhere between $1 and $4 million in revenue. So the company currently employs about 15 people, and some might argue that none more important than this guy right here. So Mike Nolan, who runs the warehouse logistics for Acme Metals. They're a relatively small company with a predictable recurring business, but recently one of their key clients' business grew tremendously after an acquisition, and they need to be able to scale with them in order to accommodate the growth. If they're unable to, they face the risk of losing one of their biggest clients and really the opportunity to certify themselves as one of the industry leaders. So in order to accelerate their digital transformation efforts, and as showcased by Eric on the roadmap journey that we walked through, it's often true that once a company reaches a certain stage of their growth, their needs are so specific that it becomes increasingly difficult or expensive to find an off-the-shelf solution that will fit their needs exactly. So at this stage, companies are often forced to develop their own application in-house, which traditionally has meant that they need to hire a full-fledged software development team to build and manage it. But now, in the same way that Google Cloud and AWS have abstracted away the underlying infrastructure where these apps were previously built, Google's AppSheet platform has abstracted away much of the process of actually developing these applications. So, and this is what we mean when we say that we're really putting the power in the hands of the citizen developers. This entire demo really revolves around creating an easy and efficient way of managing orders in a warehouse that's scalable. It allows the front-end workers in the warehouse, aka the pickers, the people who go around the warehouse packaging the individual line items into the order. It gives them the ability to complete their assignment. We're also giving the managers, the strategic planners, the sales teams, etc., near real-time access to the operational data that's being created on the fly. So to jump into the current state of how the organization is currently running, as it stands, Mike Nolan organizes all of the orders coming in into a spreadsheet. He dispatches the pickers in the warehouse to go pack together all of the line items in an order, and then manually updates the master inventory spreadsheet once the order has been confirmed to be complete. I can imagine that all of you in here can understand how this method quickly fails at scale. Mike quickly becomes a choke point with even the slightest unexpected influx of orders. This is not only cumbersome and inefficient, but it's also a process that simply doesn't scale. It's incredibly hard to manually update all of the systems of record, and it's prone to human error. I mean, translating all of this data across all the different data sources or departments becomes a whole challenge in itself. So that plus that data and the metrics are not immediately available to the decision makers when they need it. So for example, if a manager or the sales team needs to make a decision on a new opportunity, they have to wait until the pickers have finished packing all of their orders to understand what their inventory levels look like. So really the objective here is to eliminate all of those barriers in a cost-effective, scalable, and immediately accessible way. So, and the initial step here is to create the app and import the data. And as we import the data, as you can see here on the slide, it's as simple as selecting your data source and then selecting each of the individual tables that you want to import. And the first interesting thing here to highlight is that based off of the content of each of the columns, as well as the name of that field, AppSheet is often capable of intelligently deducing the type of data that's in the column. So for example, if we were to import a table with a field called address, then the data type is immediately recognized as an address. Or if we were to import a table with a column named customer, and we already have a customer table imported into our app, then it automatically understands that the column is referencing a record in the other table without any additional configuration. So initially, what we're doing is nothing more than simply putting an interface to our data at the most base level. Like we're really just adding a way to visualize and interact with our data to a well-structured portal, as we'll see here in a second. But as you can see through the GIF that just repeated, we're importing the tables that were presented on the previous slide. So for the inventory, the orders, the order items, and the customers. So this is essentially a short GIF of us configuring the user interface. And once we ensure that all of our tables are configured to our liking, as in we have all the correct data types, AppSheet can pretty autonomously build a standard user interface with basic crew control for the data. So immediately you're able to create, you're able to read, update, and delete data on demand. All of which can obviously be restricted based on a variety of parameters, the role of the users accessing it, the departments, or you can even specify one specific user with admin level tasks. Anything can happen. So here, really the only configurations that we've done to the interface are that we change the accent colors of our app to the Quinix orange. We've added the Cloud Bakers logo on top, all cosmetic. But then we also grouped the inventory records by warehouse, and we grouped the orders by status and by customer. Everything else was automatically provisioned by AppSheet based on the types of data and the records that we have. But we will dive a bit deeper into the actual live application functionality in just a second. I just want to give you guys a quick walkthrough of the steps necessary to actually build an application. So now that we have all of the data ingested into AppSheet, we can configure some additional functionality beyond the crew controls that come built in with our tables. So AppSheet calls these things behaviors. And it essentially helps us control how users interact with the app and how, in turn, our app can interact with the data. So in our example here, we're creating a very simple button which allows our on-the-field pickers to start working on an order. Whenever they click on the button, it transitions the order from new to in progress, and it registers the user that performed the action and timestamp on the back end. And I've created a couple more buttons for the app, but the process follows the exact same structure that you're seeing here on the GIF. I mean, we can review the functionality in a little bit when we get our hands on the final product, but it's mainly to showcase just how simple it is with a couple of clicks of a button. You can have additional functionality created. Right, next one. Now, we move on to the reports portion of it, which is, and while it's great that the pickers have the controls necessary to complete their daily tasks, it's also important that our manager, Mike, and the rest of the organization get that visibility into the data that's being collected in real time. So creating the reports is really just as simple as anything else that we've done, from like adding functionality to configuring the UI. As you can see, we're creating a sample report here on the app, which essentially just involves creating a new view that pulls data from the inventory table. We select the type of graph that we want to display. We select the columns that we want the data to be pulled from, and voila, we have a simple report that now enables everyone in the organization to make informed decisions. Again, as with the other sections, we'll go into, I've built a couple of other reports here that we can quickly walk through in the next when we actually get the hands-on through the demo. So I guess we've reached the live demo here. So let me pull that up. I have that pulled up here on another tab on my screen. And any questions that you guys had so far, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can address them in the QA. Be more than happy to. If there's anything that needs to be discussed in further detail, I'm also always an email away. So to move on to the live demo and to actually interact with the app and give you guys a quick walkthrough of what we just built. That you've seen on those slides. The first scenario here that I really just wanted to quickly walk through, it's just a general overview of what the app looks like. And we're looking at this from an admin perspective. So an admin obviously has access to everything that can be performed within the application. They have access to the list of customers. They can access each of these customers individually. They have reports immediately available to them. They can access the list of inventory items based off of warehouse. They can immediately access the orders here. They can either select all of the orders. They can subset them by the new orders. That's further subsetted by the customer for that specific order. And you can sort them in all sorts of ways. So there's that. It's very simple. If we wanted to restrict access to certain data or certain functionality within the app, we could do so very easy depending on the role of the user that's accessing it, or for example, the department that the user is in. I think a good scenario here would be our pickers theoretically should really only have access to this orders tab, because this is the only, at least for our little demo here, the only access that they would need. So theoretically, we're seeing this from an admin perspective, but for the pickers, the people on the field, they would only see this order tab and they'll be able to accomplish their day-to-day tasks just as quickly. Another thing that I wanted to highlight here is that really without any further configurations or modifications, AppSheet offers a pretty incredible searchability function. So if we wanted to go on the customers list and quickly get a view of our customers that are in the oil industry, we would simply type oil here, and that immediately subsets that list. It can be either subsetting by industry. You can subset by any keyword that shows up anywhere within the user record. So if there's a representative name that you perhaps like remember that you want to quickly search for that company, it's just as simple as really typing that name here, and that user will, or that customer will immediately pop up. So going back to our original use case, and really walking you through the day-to-day operations of this app, and really like the purpose of being able to manage the logistics within the warehouse. Our warehouse manager really needs a way for his pickers, his warehouse agents, to go about their day autonomously while also completing all of the tasks accordingly. So here on the orders page, so I want you guys to really picture this from a picker's point of view, an on-the-field agent that's there within the warehouse, that's starting the orders, that's going about their day and really registering the data accordingly. Users will be able to like navigate through the orders page of the application, navigate to the list of new orders, and the new orders here are orders that haven't either been completed or that aren't in progress by other pickers. So they can go in, see the set of new orders, and then pick the orders that they want to work on. So, for example, they want to work on this order 1880. They can immediately go in. They can see who the order is from. They can see the address. They can see when it was ordered, when it has to ship by, and if there's some discrepancy here in the data, this was all fake data created. So it's funny that the order date is after the shipping date, but it's all dummy data. But the picker essentially would be able to log in. And if you see here at the bottom, this is the first button that we created during the demo. This is an option to start the order. And as we mentioned, this essentially gives the user confirmation page. And now they're able to start packaging that order. So that order status immediately changes to in progress. The user can go around the warehouse, picking each of the line items necessary. As they do that, we've created another button here, which is relatively small. But essentially what this does is this transitions that product line item to status added to the order. So like now the picker knows that they've added that item to the list, and it changes here the color from red to green. They can go about doing that for all the other orders as they pick everything. And then at the end, once they have everything completed, they can go here and they can complete the order. And they, again, another confirmation page pops up to make sure that they can confirm that it has been packaged and complete. So once they hit that, it's very similar functionality to our first start button, but where it's different here is that this button also discounts the quantity of each item that was fulfilled from the master inventory sheet. So now, not only like are the pickers more capable of going about their job, but the data that's being produced, the order statuses, the inventory levels, they're updated and visible immediately to the rest of the company in near real time. So again, going back to that scenario where a customer calls and it's a relatively big order in the middle of a busy day, rather than having to wait for all the pickers to be done with their picking and reporting the accurate numbers at the end of the day, the data is collected from the app and it's immediately visible to the salesperson, who would in turn be empowered to make the right decision based on the accurate inventory levels. So this is all really just scratching the surface of the iceberg here. Beyond these behaviors that we have that are simple, if this, then that, functionality within AppSheet. AppSheet also allows you to create like more complex automations through event-based actions, which can automatically trigger a set of internal to AppSheet or external functions that can complete virtually any tasks. It can be anything from alerts, notifications, to calling HTTP webhooks for a function or an API that you have running on GCP, for example. So this can be particularly useful, for example, like in our specific customer scenario, for if they were using some sort of min-max reordering mechanism for their inventory, we can have an automation that would trigger a replenishment of their inventory when the levels of a certain product or a group of products falls below a certain level. So it's it can do very powerful stuff, not just when it comes to making things happen within AppSheet, but anything that AppSheet really isn't capable of handling. If it's a more complex function that has to interact with some external system, it's able to send a webhook to anywhere they want that's going to complete that task ultimately. So for me personally, what AppSheet has really helped me with is I'm a developer. I've always struggled a little bit with front-end development, but now I can create apps, full stack apps, that essentially just allowed me to do the entire backend of the app, but then AppSheet provides me the front end, for example. So that has been pretty useful on my end specifically, just a little nugget of information. But lastly, the only thing I wanted to really talk about here is that reports piece that we built in our GIFs. And here, beyond that report that we built for the inventory levels, we've also built another reports, and they were all just as simple to create. It's a matter of selecting the source, selecting the tables they want to display, selecting how you want them to be displayed. The difference here is that we've put everything into a dashboard that can be easily customizable by the end user for their specific needs. For example, here we have a pie chart where we can quickly identify who our biggest customers are. You can clearly see that orange, blue, and red here are the ones that have the most orders in the system. And you can subset this by date, for example. Here we have an employee scoreboard where we can see which one of our pickers are the most efficient, the least efficient, who's slacking off, who perhaps needs help. It gives a pretty quick visualization into all of the data, into all of the metrics that are actively happening. This one, for example, we have the average number of items that are sold on a day-to-day basis, so we can start to identify certain the discrepancies in our data, such as why do we not have any orders on 9/1, for example. It gives you a quick insight look into like what's actually happening within your entire organization. And it's incredibly simple to set up. And lastly, we have the inventory levels here. Not only can you see them in this dashboard view, but if we wanted to expand and really dive deeper into it, we can also do that. We can subset here. This is obviously all running client side, so you can have these amazing visualizations that are updating quickly without data having to be sent back and forth, because everything is already there available on the user's device. Here, we can have, for example, a quick view into what kind of discrepancies are there in our warehouse, in our inventory. There's obviously a lot more items on order than we have available in the warehouse, so there's probably something wrong there, and this can be like a great example of an item that we would take a look at, and if we don't have any automation set up, then maybe we can manually go in here and reorder this item because we have a lot of things coming in. And beyond that, these visualizations also allow us to subset data, to filter data based off what we want. So, for example, if we wanted to see what the inventory levels look like for all of our bolts, since we are a metals manufacturing company at the end of the day, we just simply type bolt there. And these are all of the bolts that we currently have in our inventory. And again, we can start identifying which levels are healthy, which levels aren't healthy, for us to be able to have some actionable items on our end. And full disclosure, this application probably took me about 3 hours to make. I think that creating the GIFs for the presentation took me a little bit longer than actually creating the application. So with very simple and to be frank, like a very cheap alternative to a lot of softwares that are out there, you can create all kinds of interesting workflows and applications that will really help your business just by using AppSheet. But that is all for me. Again, let me know if there's any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them at the end of the webinar.
Awesome. Hey, Rommel, thanks so much for walking us through that. Really impactful stuff that we're looking at there, right? I mean, think about this process at Acme Metal being kind of a completely manual one. You know, he's working with spreadsheets, he's printing out pick lists for these people in the warehouse, and he's completely transformed how the data is captured, how the warehouse workers do their day-to-day work. He removes a lot of variables from that scenario and adds a ton of value to stakeholders outside of the warehouse. So it's a huge win for that company and Mike over there. So let me just pull up a tab here and we'll wrap up a couple of things. Okie doke. Perfect. Okay, guys. So when it comes to getting started with AppSheet, right? How do you even begin, right? It's something that's kind of a new concept, no code, low code applications, right? There's a lot of different ways to engage with the tool, with Cloudbaker's Quinix, right? Essentially, a lot of times what we're seeing with folks who don't necessarily have a lot of experience with these tools is, stepping in and calling into a partner like Cloudbaker's Quinix to help them build out that prototype, right? And this is almost like a crash course in AppSheet. So it's as much education as it is kind of building out an actual application for the organization. So essentially, we call that a rapid prototyping package. all we do is we work with you, hands on the keyboard with you, kind of virtually, to build out these applications and the use cases, right? So we're right there with you as you build this out, helping you define the requirements, helping you define the data structure, and building that application out with you. So it's really a great way to start, because you can find that point solution for a problem that might be too specific for, you know, an off-the-shelf solution. Other ways that you can engage with us here is essentially an AppSheet discovery. So maybe you don't know which business processes are a good fit for AppSheet applications. What we can do is we can help interview stakeholders, ask the right questions, understand your business at a fundamental level, and see how data is flowing through your organization and where it's getting caught, right? Or where it's not getting captured. And we'll help build out kind of a inventory of potential projects that you could use AppSheet to resolve there. Another way to engage with us here is essentially a transformation lab. So this is where we can come in on site or virtually and cultivate that citizen developer crew at your organization, right? So whether that's at a team level, department, or across the entire organization, right? We'll help build those citizen developers within your organization so that they can then take that tool set and then run with it and start solving day-to-day problems, you know, independently, without the assistance of a development team, without the assistance of, you know, IT to a certain extent, and really feel equipped and knowledgeable when it comes to AppSheet. So think of this as like we're training everyone up to use the tools so that they can run with them. And then finally, right, if none of these make sense and you don't have the people or you don't have the time, right, you can come to us and we'll plan, coordinate, and execute the actual implementation of the application for you on the AppSheet platform and help you kind of build all of that out, and then give you the final product that you can then maintain, refine, and update. And so those are just a few of the ways that, you know, we provide services around this. When it comes to AppSheet, it's really about education and kind of empowering people in your organization. So that's where we start first, right? Is always trying to make sure that everyone is up to speed and knows kind of the capabilities of the tool set. And, you know, last resort essentially is we step into the whole thing for you. So I know we've probably got some questions over there in the chat, but let's see what we've got here. Okay. So just scrolling up, looks like we've got one around data collection. So does the AppSheet product help with the collection process? Rama, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Sean here mentioned a little bit into connecting to your ERP systems or your e-commerce platforms. But AppSheet in itself, I mean, if you have an app, it comes pre-built with those crude controls. So you're immediately able to generate new data that gets automatically transferred to whatever data source that you have connected. You're able to update that data. You're able to delete it. You're able to visualize it. So it does, in a nutshell, it does help with data collection. And you can have it on the hands of the users. You can have it yourself inputting data if you want. It's often a much more efficient way of actually collecting data than if you're filling out a form or if you're sending out forms to your users. I hope that answers your question.
And that works across APIs, webhooks, spreadsheets, connected sheets, databases, right? If you have access to the data and can write to that, there's a way to connect AppSheet to it. So it's really data agnostic when it comes to that type of collection and processing. So it's really flexible there. Mm-hmm. We've got a question about how the licensing works. So with that one, I'll take that. So essentially, if you're on any of the enterprise workspace SKUs, you have access to AppSheet with that package. So with that addition, you get access to AppSheet Core, which is, you know, essentially we used AppSheet Core to build our demo here today. So you've got access to connected sheets. You've got access to, you know, building all of the UI elements, the reporting functionality that we've seen, and that is on an active user basis. So essentially, it's just looking at who used the app within a monthly time span, and that's how you know how many users used it. And then if you need to kind of connect it to any external data sources or APIs, things like that, they have some kind of higher tier editions of AppSheet that, again, kind of work on that active user basis. So internal teams, right, only the people who are using it are getting kind of charged for that use. And so another question here is, how much work is needed to have one of these apps run on an Android device, if at all possible?
Nearly none. As soon as the app is deployed, you can send a link to your users, and they can immediately download the application on their device. So it's maybe something that takes 2 minutes for you to deploy the app, run the deployment test, make sure you're on the right license, and once you deploy it and it's live, you can send that link to your users, and they can immediately download it on their device, iOS, Android. They can access the app through a web browser. So it's pretty versatile when it comes to that.
Okay. Awesome. And then let me just see if I can't pull up some of our other questions prior. Let's see if there's anything that's kind of left lingering out there. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat here. We've got questions like, how quickly can an app be released? I think we addressed that one a little bit earlier. I mean, it could take 15 minutes to build this application. It could take a few hours, right? It might take a week. The idea here is that the timelines for developing these applications is drastically short. I mean, magnitudes shorter than actually developing them from the ground up. Like Rama was saying, it completely removes a lot of the technical bottlenecks that like prevent people from building custom applications, and allows you to kind of turn these around really quickly. The idea is that this is an agile application that can be refined over time based on the feedback from the users of the application, and you don't have to worry about kind of redeploying it, right? You just kind of update it, and then they'll immediately receive that update when they open the application next. And so another question that we've got here, how can these applications kind of improve productivity for employees? I mean, anytime you have users going through a manual process where data needs to transition between either teams, peoples, departments, right? This is an applicable solution. Essentially, right, if they're using paper, if they're using spreadsheets, if they're using a third-party tool, right, that's not necessarily connected to a accessible source, there is a use case for AppSheet. Anytime that you have those folks kind of entering data in anywhere, you can control their access, you can validate their data, you can trigger automations, all with these applications. So it really kind of amplifies their efficiency to a great extent, because they're able to do more by just doing their job, right? You build a structure around the process with this application, and then you kind of collect the information and are able to distribute it in a much faster way than other tools out there. And so another question we've got here, and it might be a little bit of a repeat, but is there any patching or upgrade needed? Rommel, can you take that one? Oh, you're on mute.
Oops. Yeah, I was saying that I think you've already mentioned a big part of this, but you can release the application to your users. You can release them. AppSheet works on also a semantic versioning schema in a diluted way. So you can release an application that's a version 1 to your users, and you can make whatever modifications that you need, and you can roll out those updates as needed. So yes, you can patch and you can upgrade your apps as you go.
Right, and there's almost like a test environment and a production environment, right? You can make the changes, and then once everything is good, you can actually just deploy those.
Yep, essentially.
Perfect. And then it looks like the last question in here as we come up on time, does AppSheet have any AI capabilities? So I think out of the box, right, Rommel, it's using AI and machine learning to kind of understand, based on the data that it's seeing, how to build the application. But I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. AppSheet is really, I guess, how Google really defines this. It's an intelligent platform. It has a lot of just intelligent features to it that come straight out of the box. Anything from being able to understand your data structure, to defining those data types, but also it has things such as OCR, which I'm pretty confident built in even through the core levels of service, where you're able to take a picture of a form and it's automatically able to fill in a spreadsheet or translate that data from characters to actual text in the application. Or it can even have some machine learning models that are running in the background that allow you to predict data in the future. So there's a lot of really interesting features to explore with AppSheet that can really save you a lot of stress when it really comes to you having to develop your own learning analytics models, where you can just simply use AppSheet for a lot of that.
And then as we come up on time here, we have one last question. This one is, can we build AppSheet from custom data sources? Right. So this is that question, right? As long as you can get to the data and you've got, the ability to read and write to that database, you should be able to connect AppSheet to that. It's a matter of, there would be a little bit of custom development that would be needed there from a back end perspective, right? To connect and integrate those two systems. But if there was an API available, or if you were able to execute kind of SQL inserts and things like that, it would be no issue connecting those two applications together. And that's really kind of the beauty of AppSheet, is that it gives you a controllable interface for interacting with these data sources. And it removes all of the difficulty and technical acumen required to kind of build that front end. And then you're able to control it from an IT perspective and data governance perspective by using different types of expressions and things like that in the application itself to validate this data before sending it over. And with that, folks, we have rounded the corner on our webinar. I really appreciate everyone's time here today. I hope that you walked away with a few use cases and valuable pieces of information about AppSheet, and maybe even some curiosity about how you could get started with that. If you do have any questions, feel free to email those over to us. You can send those to edaniel@cloudbakers.com. That's my email address. We'll get those answered for you and kind of follow up there. I will be sending this presentation out, the recording of this, to all of the attendees, all of the registrants. And then, yeah, you can kind of review this offline. And if you need any help with AppSheet in the future, Google Workspace, Google Cloud, I hope you think of Cloud Bakers Clinics. Thank you so much for your time.